Hello, I'm Dominic Davies, founder of Pink Therapy. We've been training mental health specialists worldwide to work with gender, sex, and relationship diverse clients for many years. This podcast puts the lives of some of these incredible, pioneering therapists front and center and gives us insights into what it's like to be LGBTIQA+, or as we prefer, GSRD, speaking in their words. Hi, I'm Dominic Davies. I'm the founder of Pink Therapy, and I'm here with Kris Black, one of our clinical associates. Kris, introduce yourself to us and tell us a bit about your background and work in the field of counselling.
I'm an integrative art psychotherapist, and I've been a counsellor probably for about 41 years as well. Yeah, I trained in various places, but my foundational training was with an organisation. When I first started out as a counsellor called Black Lesbian and Gay Centre, all the way back in the 1980s. That was a foundation for training that I had. But no course ever that I did met up to it, because we were trained as a small group by Black bisexual trainer. And in those days, of course, there was a lot going on in terms of activism and stuff like that. And yeah, from there, I then carried on and did counselling in various organisations. I've worked in schools, and I'm currently a clinical supervisor. And I've done lots of training lots of different organisations. And yeah, and now I'm an editor, a co-editor.
Now you're an editor. Therapy in colour.
Intersectional, anti-racist and intercultural approaches by therapists of colour. I'm very, very humbled and very proud to be able to hold this work of over 7 years in my hand and say, we did that. That happened.
It's a big deal.
I think it's a big deal. It's a big deal for me. Yeah. I'm not an academic. That has not been afforded to me as a result of various interactions with the academic world of psychotherapy and counselling, which we won't say much more about, but and I will one day write about it. But for now, let's say it has not been an easy road, and for many of the people writing in this weighty tome, it has not been an easy road due to the way that psychotherapy and counselling needs to upgrade itself, I suppose, in terms of understanding race and racism as part of its work in the world. So it's taken quite a lot of doing, both getting a book together, but also, I think, getting to this point that now there are several publications on race and racism in the profession. I like to think this is a trailblazing book, because it's not just about race and racism. It's also about, kind of lots of different lenses on how psychotherapy theory and supervision and training can step up to the challenge, I guess, about thinking about anti-racist practice and intersectional theory and weaving that all in together. So it's not just a book about how we're oppressed. I think it's a book about how we can celebrate the strength and the real, what is the word when you do something really well? All of these writers in here have, put a lot of work into thinking therapeutically and thinking, not just academically, thinking intersectionally, thinking about how they can, put the work that they have come across and they've been part of into a chapter. And that's no mean feat, actually, when you think about it. To actually try and condense what might be years and years of practice into a single chapter. And I am humbled and awed by the ability of the writers in this publication, really. So, I don't write a chapter, I just write the epilogue. And I've just been part of holding it together a lot of the time with Dr. Aisha Mackenzie Mavinga. We were working alone together, trying to draw people in and get people to kind of, commit and also be brave.
So drawing people in, where did you find you've got a lot of authors there. There's a lot of people of color as therapists sharing their journeys and their experiences in a very diverse way. Where did you find them all?
Well, I was part of the leadership team of Barton at the time that Aisha actually suggested maybe we need a book. We put it out to the membership of Barton several times.
So Barton is the Black and Asian...
Black Asian Therapist Network. I think it's been called several different things, but it's kind of like, it's now down to just its letters. It is known generically as Barton, the Black African Asian Therapist Network. And all of the people writing in this publication are members of that network, which is something that has grown from quite a small network to quite a large and sprawly network, which is kind of turning out a lot of people who are trainers, people who are working in the field in various ways. So that's where we got them from. It was a call out, several call outs to what is quite a diverse community, and a community that I've worked with for several years as well as a group worker as well. So I also was at the time part of the Saturday network of practitioners. So I'd hold space for Black African and Asian therapists who wanted to just come, qualified practitioners, newly qualified practitioners who just want to come and talk, network together and gain support and chat every month about challenges, opportunities, work, that kind of stuff. So some of the people came from there. Some of the people were new to me. Some of the people just kind of said, yeah, we'll do this. Some of the people said, yeah, and then didn't. So it was, more do you want to? And I can't believe it's taken this long to get it from do you want to yes. And a lot of energy goes into kind of creating the framework for a book. I think we often think, well, we just put out a call and people will do it. That's not the case. You have to encourage people, especially people who are writers for the first time, especially people who are writing around controversial subjects. They may be writing with critique of, institutions, institutional violence. So there's a lot to get over before you can even, I think, in some cases, start to write or believe you can, because psychotherapy is a complicated beast and it often doesn't like being critiqued. I know that from my own journey through the therapeutic world. So we put calls out and then we partnered people up together. We buddied people up together to co-edit their pieces, which was a way of just making sure people weren't isolated in the
That's a good idea. Nice. That's a lovely idea. Because they can mutually support each other on their project and encourage each other along.
Exactly. So we did that. That was part of the work, getting people partnered up, getting people to look at each other's chapters and kind of, and then there's the kind of, the kind of get deadlines, and deadlines kind of stretch, don't they, if people aren't ready. So I think people have to be ready to put their work and themselves out into the world. Years and years ago, I draw on experience from being a community publisher. So I used to publish magazines and stuff like that way back in the day. So I know the struggle with not just getting people to write, but I know the struggle with kind of like supporting people to kind of go, yeah, I want to do it. And then life takes over. And then, real life, if you're a busy practitioner or you're growing a practice, that can often get in the way.
Yeah.
And
there are other priorities, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. But also if you're writing about stuff that is challenging to the status quo, that can evoke a lot of feelings.
It takes a lot of courage that for these writers to speak out against their so-called alma maters, if we, the bodies that trained them, and to speak out and say, actually, this wasn't a good experience for me.
Yeah.
And there was racism there, and there was hate there, and there were difficulties there, from systemically from within the institution, or from the people I was studying with.
There is that theme in the work.
Right. Right. And I think that takes a tremendous amount of courage because you're putting your name out there to this piece of work. You're not writing anonymously. You're owning it and saying that this is not good.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, owning it and also kind of really wanting to create change within the profession, and doing that from a real place of integrity about, on one hand, critiquing the very profession that we're part of, but also really being dedicated to change happening within the profession. And that's what strikes me about every person writing in this context, is that every person writing in this context, is really committed to change for the good of not just clients, for the good of trainees, for the good of our colleagues, for the good of the profession itself. And possibly, if we go even broader than that, for the good of the systems that we interact with on a day-to-day level, really. So, I am very, very proud of every person that has picked up a pen and said, yeah, I'm going to do it, and just persevered to the end. Like I say, it's like all I did was help to coordinate it, really. I am very proud to have been part of that process and not to have given up, because it could have been easy. It wouldn't have been easy to just say 3 or 4 years have gone past. It still hasn't happened. But yeah, just perseverance. Perseverance is and I'm a finisher. I like to see things completely, so I don't give up, really.
They need somebody like that with the tenacity to drive the project forwards from the back. I mean, that's what you've been doing. You've been pushing this forward and encouraging people rather than leading from the front, and bringing them together and supporting them along the way. And I think that's a noble act. It's not about the aggrandizement of your own professional career and reputation when you're not writing your own chapter and your own ideas. You're actually editing and nourishing and nurturing a whole range of relatively new writers to be brave enough to tell their story, to tell their truth.
Yeah, and to do that with real integrity. I think all of what this book shows is how different all of the people writing in it are, even though we come under a similar banner, united around things to do with race and racism. It's kind of like an intersectionality. Every one of the pieces in here are, each one of these pieces could be a book in itself. And I guess the starting of this is partly, the hope that there will be more that comes out of this book as well. It's not just the book, that's it, sits on the shelf. But that each of these people will also be kind of like in their own right recognised for the work that they're doing,
That's right. I think there's a kind of sense of empowerment to take their ideas forwards, to encourage them to, if they've got more to say, to develop things. And as you said, a couple of books have kind of grown out of this project. So you've birthed other people's ideas and books that have just come out. And
well, I guess they've birthed them, but it's kind of like being a disruptor or a catalyst, right?
Oh, being a disruptor. Okay. Being the sand in the sand in the oyster shell.
That's right.
That they rub against and become the pearl.
That's right. And unfortunately, along the way, we lost 2 black men who were writing and were authors round about the time of COVID, which was like, ouch, big ouch, knowing that 2 giants, really. I mean, Lennox Thomas has been writing and lecturing for many, many years within the analytic field. So to have one of his chapters as live and legacy in here is really important too. And Eric A. Grant as well, kind of. Both of them passed before the book was published, so that's really sad. But it's also life, I guess. So yeah, that's background, and that's how it got to be in my hands. I still can't believe it's in my hands. I still can't. I keep holding on. I keep going, oh my God, this is real. This is real.
It's so lovely.
Read it.
It's so lovely to see your absolute joy with this. It's a gorgeous feeling. I'm bathing in this joy here. It's lovely, really lovely. And I think it will encourage people to to be curious about going and getting a copy and reading it themselves, because you're very passionate about this, and I think it's a really important contribution to the field, and it's very overdue. We need, but it's coming at a time when we're really looking at decolonializing therapy and the kind of Western approaches, and looking at intersectionality in a deeper way, and looking at whether therapy, as it's practiced in Britain as a Western approach, is really fit for purpose for many marginalized communities. And I think that we need to hold that in mind and question that. And it's something that I've been talking about at the last conference, and I'm taking my own ideas forwards. That I think in many ways, for queer clients and for neurodivergent clients, therapy isn't necessarily a one-to-one traditional individual therapy of the 50-minute hour is not necessarily the most helpful response to trying to help people sort things out.
Well, you say that, but that's what I'm practicing currently. And a lot of my
I know. Yeah. And I practiced it for 40 years.
Yeah,
I practiced it for 40 years. It's when I stopped practicing it that I was able to start look back at it and say, now if I reflect on that, was it always the most effective way of working, particularly around neurodivergence? And there's a lot of therapists coming out as neurodivergent now, a lot of clients presenting. So it's very prevalent within the queer community, not in the whole queer community. And I think we need to be willing to be responsive and flexible in the most client-centered way possible to what the client needs, rather than what's convenient for the therapist.
Absolutely. What's really interesting is how many writers in here are actually right-brain thinkers, because they're art therapists. They're kind of like poets. They're writing, from a different lens. There are a few more traditional thinkers in here, but each of them in the way that they're writing, you can see how we don't necessarily fit into the tradition, or how we've kind of. I could say queered it. We have queered it.
You could.
You could. Maybe that's kind of part of queerness kind of leaks into everything, I think. And when you say that stuff about the 50-minute hour, I worked for about over 13 years with children and young people in schools, and the 50-minute hour didn't fit because I was playing basketball with half of them as part of their therapy. In the transference of the absent father, or sitting there playing up to our elbows in paint and Play-Doh. Many of the writers in here are actually art therapists and creatives. So there's something about that that's true. It's like, can we meet the client in terms of where they're at? And obviously a lot of kind of traditional, I say traditional because they're not traditional, they're kind of Eurocentric approaches to therapy, kind of like are quite rigid in their approach. And if we think about it, of course, therapy's evolved from these deeply boring poems, which I read many cis white men's work when I was training, right? I kind of fell asleep, but also not just fell asleep, tried to work out, how does this apply to us? How does this apply to us in the modern day world? And I think that's part of it. We can take these things and not kind of and decide to queer them, right? And because that's what we've done, over time, in terms of thinking about decolonizing, in terms of thinking about how do we create other ways of kind of not just sitting and staring with a blank face, which, can be quite abusive and harmful if you think about it.
Indeed.
Not mirroring the client or giving the face. Yeah, if you're working with children, they'll just shut down. If you're working with young people or adolescents, they'll walk out if you try that shit.
Right.
Excuse my French, but it just doesn't work, right? So a therapy that's fit for the communities that we're working with has to step up to being dialogic in a way that is important and relevant. There are even people who are talking about doing walking therapy with people, and that was interesting. Like COVID The things that emerged from COVID that we were allowed to do, that we weren't allowed to do before.
That we've always been told we should never do.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Yes.
So a lot of energy that went into kind of like, shaping the profession in a particular way, which suits particular people, if you think about it. Your average counsellor or therapist, I think, is actually cis female, heterosexual, with a husband who's a banker, probably, because then they can afford the courses and the training.
And white. Let's not forget their whiteness.
And perhaps able-bodied.
Yes. Likely.
Kind of,
middle class.
Likely, middle class. So the profession has kind of like been shaped in a particular way, and along come these people like us that don't fit in necessarily, and are asking the profession to move over and try to incorporate the whole of humankind in the way that it does therapy, brains therapy. I mean, when I first trained, like I said, I had a good role model, and then I kept trying to find that role model again. I kept trying to find the queerness and the perspectives about intersectionality. And it's kind of like, why is it absent when it's not absent in the world? It's not absent as part of many of our experiences as marginalised others, or as people of the global majority, really. It's not marginal if we kind of think about it, really. But the profession marginalises it, so that's not relevant. Let's just take a big...
We do it this way. We do it this way.
Just do it this way, exactly. So it's kind of like, I'm glad that in 2023, it's like courses and institutions are starting to recruit Black supervisors, recruit Black trainers, and recruit people who are not your traditional average, statistically inclined therapist. Because we need that. We all need that. Because clients are increasingly becoming aware of what they need. And what they need is not just to be mirrored, they also need to be understood. They don't need us to frame things for them. They need to frame things for us. So to meet that, I think psychotherapy and counselling has to step up. It can't just pretend.
And I think it's more than just having Black faces on the staff group. It's also looking at the curriculum. It's looking at how do we reflect the populations that we're looking to serve through the curriculum, through what we're teaching people, and that's very important.
Yeah, and we have to teach people that it's relevant. It's not irrelevant. Racism, ableism, anti-lesbianism, homophobia, anti-transness, those are not irrelevant. They are highly relevant, and they're highly relevant even more so now at a point in time when you think about younger generations are growing up with understanding of intersectionality that many of these institutions just don't have.
Sure.
And so students are coming into institutions and saying, what? Why have you not got this?
Why is it done this way? What's this about?
Why are you doing this? Exactly.
Yeah.
You can no longer just kind of accept the dead European white cis male lens as being the only lens through which you understand people. So it's like, I think they just have to move over a little bit, don't they? And I think some institutions seem to be trying to do that, to go, okay, we need to be relevant. Obviously, where you push forward in one way, there are also ways in which things are pushed back on as well, because that's the nature of things, isn't it? Change in motion always creates resistance. So there's going to be resistance. But I'm glad that doing this work shows just how different we all are. We're not a homogenous glob, people who experience the impact of racism. It's kind of like at the forefront of things. I'm not just a homogenous globe. We're very, very different, both in terms of how we think, in terms of how we frame intersectional approaches.
There's a lot of diversity within this diversity.
There is, definitely. And to be a trans queer person, sharing editorial kind of power with other people as well, kind of like, and doing that as an out person is really, that feels good to be able to do that, to be able to kind of say, we are everywhere. Queerness exists everywhere. It's not just in the crap. And I think it was really important for me to kind of like, to be an out person writing in this context and standing in that context, so we don't just get marginalized into the bit that people see about us, but that we're understood as whole beings. There are a couple of other writers in here who are out and proud as well, and that's really nice to see. I wish that it were possible to not even have to talk about that as though we need to come out or be out about who we are. It should be a given that we can just be who we are without that being seen as a thing we're afraid of or a thing that we have to come out of the closet about, But anyway, that's me kind of going off at a tangent, as I do.
Well, not necessarily, and I think it's probably a perfectly useful place for our purposes, for Pink Therapy's purposes, to kind of draw, to end the podcast at that point, because we've got a very particular lens and mission here, and so I think it's really good that you've got queer people writing in a book like this and sharing their experiences alongside everybody else. And that diversity is equally accepted and welcomed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the important bit. And that's why it's important because it says something, it paves the way for that being okay for other people to be able to say, yes, I am queer, I am trans, I am bisexual, I am gay, I am a lesbian. It's kind of like, I just think that we're no longer in the margins. We're mainstream. And this book also is important. It was important to kind of like just to stand for that as part of this process as well. It wasn't hard, but standing for it was. So buy the book.
Well, buy the book.
15% discount if you go directly through JKP and say Wellbeing 50 on your
Wellbeing 15.
Wellbeing 15. You'll get a discount if you're listening to this podcast.
That's important for people. It's an expensive book.
It is. It's not. It is. It's 40 quid.
Sadly,
I mean, that's not what I would have liked it to be, but that's how much books are these days. And it's 21 chapters, so it's quite a thick book, and it's worth it. It's worth it. So
there we are.
Go
it's
for
worth
it. Learn. Spread it around, get it on the library shelves. Don't just get it on the library shelves, get it into courses. Get it
onto courses. Get the course to buy the book, put it on the library, in the course
library.
Put it on the
curriculum. Race and intersectionality on the curriculum. And then any one of these people can come along, and I would stand by any one of these people teaching on courses.
That's good to know. Well, thanks so much, Kris. It's lovely to get the opportunity to talk to you about this, particularly at this point when you're just brimming with joy.
I am. Publication day was last week.
Yes, and you're still writing that. And it's fab.
I am away.
All right. Well, lovely to see you again. And
thank you,
good
Dominic.
luck to you and all the other contributors to the book. Yeah.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please click like and subscribe to hear when the next one is released. If you're a therapist looking to enhance your knowledge and skills with GSRD clients, please check out our training website, pinktherapy.org. We run 1 and 2 year specialist training programs online, as well as offer a wide range of short CPD modules. Thanks again for listening to On Becoming a GSRD Therapist.